Alright, this is Victory Games The Civil War. Got very, very high thumbs over on my BGG request list. And I'm kind of in the mood for it. I played it fairly recently, about 3 years ago. A little before I started doing the videos. I don't know how far back that is. Anyway, the last time I played it, and I put some notes up that I had put on MySpace back when I was playing it. Those I've moved over. First they were on the request thread, and now they've been moved over to my blog there because the request is going to be deleted. The last time I played it, I did not play with the Far West, this section of the board here. Part of the reason for that is it just wouldn't have quite fit on my dining room table very well. This actually, little setup with my mobile tables, works pretty well. The game does not have a humongous footprint. It's just 2 boards, but they're laid out in a way that makes it kind of difficult to fit everywhere. And kind of get the full span there, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, let's not fall out the window. Alright. So, this has been a long time favorite. It really works well solo. And the pulsed system that it uses actually means, and I'm missing a counter that I wanted there. It's over here. The pulse system that it uses for movement means that you can pretty much take a break just about any time fairly comfortably. You take an action by one side, then you take the action by the other side, and then you're ready. You know, you can walk away, make some tea, whatever. It just takes a couple minutes of play, and you can wander away. I guess you could do the same with a CDG on each pair of card plays or something. But here it feels just easier. I throw a couple of dice over here to indicate where I am. What actually becomes difficult is the part of the game that's not the meat of the game, taking a break between turns or something. That becomes more difficult, but hey, you know, the between turn stuff doesn't take all that long. What do you got on the board? Well, first of all, the main of the action is going to really be happening on the part of the map over here. This is kind of superfluous in my mind, but then we also have all kinds of tracks to keep track of all kind of information. Let's talk about some of that. You get this general records track where you're keeping things like victory points and some of the stuff that's just collected during the turn, including how much production and then the total value of the imports plus the production that the Confederates have. You have little places to keep leaders who are out of play. The leader pool is really a draw pool that you have. The naval pool is where the Union gets to keep their ships that they haven't built yet. You have all the leaders who will be coming into the game and their individual ratings. There can be some debate about whether or not they're reasonable ratings. In some cases I feel like they're not. These guys are going to be able to be promoted. Well, some of them. And you have different levels of advancement for the leaders. Essentially, you have between 1 and 3 stars, although the Union does have a couple 4-star generals in Grant and Sherman, who have some additional advantages. Not a lot. For the most part, 3 stars is really good enough, but there are some slight advantages there. Over here on the turn track, and you can see there's only 19 turns. Yeah, only. It's not a short game, but it's not a humongous one either. You have information of reinforcements that are coming in throughout the turn. Let's zoom in a little bit to see that. And you also have ships that are coming in. For the Confederates, we keep track of their rail capacity, how many units they can move by rail. For the Union, I don't want to go over to the other side of the board, but you have the effects of Anaconda as they start taking effect on however many points of imports there are. Basically what one of the Union goals is to get the Confederate imports track, which includes all their production, below the 100 that their production starts on. Once that starts happening, you start causing some pain to the Confederates in terms of things that they do start costing more. You also have the amount of units that can travel by sea for the Union. You don't have a rail chart. The Union always has the same rail points. I don't remember what it is. It's something, it's around 8. We'll maybe hit it in the when we hit the rules a little bit more carefully. Number of river and ocean going transport ships that are going to be coming, specifically different river and ocean going ironclads. Their reinforcements as well, their leaders over here. Each side has an army track, which actually specifies how big any given army can get. There's an optional rule that allows you to throw that idea out and place armies in any theater at any size up to the limit of 25 for the Union and 20 for the Confederates, where the Northern Virginia is. And then you have these interesting tracks. Now this one keeps track of reinforcements. As you collect your reinforcement points, you put them on here, and you'll be able to get them either through spending actions in your impulses, or sometimes you get them for free, but they come out of this pool. And then command points, this is sort of the meat of the game. Like with CDGs, and this is actually one of the first games that, this is, I think, the first game that I remember having sort of this leader activation idea where you have to spend points to move a leader, and they lower the strategic initiative of the leader. So that's the first number on these leaders. That's how easy they are to activate. We're all pretty familiar with that in the wargaming crowd now with CDGs, but this was pretty damn innovative in its time. The second number here on a leader is its tactical ability, and a 3-star leader, if we can, has a little number in the middle, which is sort of army leadership rating, which affects rerolls essentially. Leaders also have a rank, the star they have, a maximum rank that they can reach, and then, hard to see unless I zoom in, a number which is what their position within the rank is. The lower that number, the better. So, if we find, I'm having trouble finding him. He's in here somewhere. There we go. Yeah, not getting used to looking through the camera as much. If we look at Robert E. Lee, he is the second highest ranked 3-star general. The first is, of course, Jeff Davis's favorite, which will be over here, Albert Sidney Johnston. Which means if the two are in a stack, Johnston's in command. Let's see if we got anything else we want to cover here. Over here then we have the western track, which indicates various Indian tribal units, including civilized, I'm sorry, those are mescaleros, Mexican. We also have civilized Indians who are going to be from the Indian Territory, and they can actually be used as regular troops. We have Texas Rangers, who are mainly good at hunting down Indians, and we have tracks to handle the far west commands. Again, this is all optional. Basically, everything from here, you could just cut this part of the map off, and I did this the last time I played, because like I said, sometimes the far west just feels like it's draining too much effort for what it is. It has a lot of victory points available in it, and you feel like your focus is coming away from the main map of the game. Over on the main map, you have these port spaces, which these are only for Confederate ports. They indicate the import value of those ports, and in some cases, like Pensacola here, which is blockaded by Fort Pickens, which is in Union control. If you look, the colors are kind of hard to tell the difference, but that actually controls Pensacola, so Pensacola does not produce any imports as long as the Union has this. It's essentially impossible to get them off that, so They will never be getting that. And likewise, Norfolk and Petersburg here, I believe, are both blocked by Fort Monroe. Norfolk has to have access to the river, the James, and where's Petersburg? Petersburg's further down up here, and the port symbol is over here to indicate that 2 is on the James River. So by blockading the James, I get a couple of imports down. And those are already subtracted off of the import level. It's conceivable that the Confederate imports could actually go above 140 if Fort Monroe was to fall. And that can be taken because that's right on the land here being faced by Magruder, who's not terribly bad compared to his opponent Butler. Not a lot of troops on the board at the beginning of the game. That'll change fairly quickly as the armies begin to coalesce. Alright, well, let's take a look also at our charts and tables here. There's a decent amount here. Blockade table just gives you your percentages. Here's what happens if Confederate supply drops below 100 and all the different effects. And basically it's something you want to have happen. Terrain effects chart. And then repeats of the Indian tables here. Naval combat chart. More used in the game. Quick way to determine your combat ratios. Those are actually pretty easy. You don't really need this, but it's better than explaining it all. Essentially what you have is certain odds, but you also have differentials built into those odds. And in some cases the differentials take effect, and in some cases it's the odds. Basically, if the odds are able to take effect, they will. So if I have 2 units against 1, I'm going to be fighting on the 2-to-1 table rather than the +1 table. But if I can't get all the way over here into the odds section, I start getting these minor differential sections. The combat chart itself looks pretty complicated, actually. You're going to end up rolling a die. How did I get to 12? It's only a 6-sided die, but it's possible to have up to +6 on the die roll. Each side basically rolls a die for combat, and then they compare the force size and determine what kind of damage they do to the enemy by that. Kind of like a firepower table at a very simple level. You have the force sizes here as a reminder, different combat results, and then shifts due to terrain, because the terrain effect chart only actually handles, it actually handles column shifts in there too. I never look at it because really the cost of moving things is kind of pretty obvious. Most things are 1. The only exception, swamps are 2. I thought forests were only 1. You have to worry of these things that look like roads or mountain passes. You have to kind of worry about them. You got your rail nets, you got your state lines on here. Each location on the board, each city, has a value that's going to affect the victory points. If you take that from your enemy, you get those victory points. If you take a whole state, you get, in addition to the victory points for capturing the cities in the state, all of them again for converting the state. This is a game about victory points, so we can call it a Euro if you like. Let's take a look at what our sequence of play is going to be like on this. I thought I had a copy of that on there, but I don't. I may have a little sheet. So the first thing that happens is the reinforcement phase. What you're going to do here is you're going to count the points. I may move that. Count the points that you're due to get in each sector and record them. The discretionary ones here, you record as discretionary. You're allowed to use them wherever you like, though. You're also going to take the leaders that you're due for that turn, which may include injured leaders and promotions, and they go kind of hidden in the leader pool. I'll probably use my cup to shake that up when it happens. Now, there shouldn't be any Confederates down here. Yet, ever, I don't know. Next you do the command phase. Now, on the first turn of the game, you have to select your resource allocations. And you use these little chits to indicate which theater is going to be your primary, secondary, and tertiary theater. Okay? And those are placed hidden face down in the 3 main sectors. Okay? There are some restrictions as to what you can place where, and there are some strong reasons that you don't want to place in the West at the beginning of the game. Primarily the fact that Kentucky is sort of verboten on the first turn of the game. It's not absolute, but you really don't want to go there. If you enter it in the first turn, it converts to the other side. It's trying to maintain its neutrality. So these are placed secretly, normally the turn before, right after they're revealed. So in this phase, you'd be revealing them, and then you roll over here. You roll on this command point table to see how many you get. And essentially you roll 2 dice, and then you read across, and you see how well you do in each of the areas you're committed to. The U.S. only gets the naval ones. Discretionary, everybody gets that many in the far west as well. It's just sort of a bonus if you're playing with that option. All right. So that's how many command points you're going to have. And those command points work kind of like ops points in the CDG, except you don't have cards for them. And we'll see how they work in a bit. CSA Commerce Raider phase. If the CSA has any raiders that they've launched, they get to roll somewhere or another. There's a commerce rating table somewhere. Yeah, I don't remember that. It's not a table. Yeah, I think you roll 2 dice, and maybe it's 1 die, and that's a percentage. No, it's a number of points. You roll 2 dice, that's a number of points that you get as the Confederates for U.S. ships sunk. And for, I think, every 25 ships that you sink, you end up getting a victory point. Now, for the U.S., they can commit warships to try to intervene with that, and that adds to the die roll. It increases the amount of shipping activity, making it easier to do damage, but if you roll an 11 or 12, the Commerce Raider is sunk instead of doing damage, I think. Oh, no, a 12. Sorry. Right. Okay. So, if you put enough not ships, you spend naval commands to indicate that you're using the warships for that. The actual sailing warships are kind of abstracted here in a lot of ways. Blockade effects, you count up, and here you're just determining where this is going to be, and then what the effects are off the blockade table that was in the charts that I showed you. Now here comes the meat of the game. Essentially, each player rolls a pair of dice. If those dice happen to be the same, okay, if they roll the same number on the pair of dice, they each get additional command points. And then this thing slides forward. Now, if they roll the same and it happens to be a number in this box, the turn will end immediately and all command points are lost. So you never can be quite sure. The game turn could end at any time with an unlucky series of rolls. But the normal effect is you won't roll the same number on your pair of dice as your opponent does. What that means is that the difference between the die rolls is going to be the number of actions that the players get. So, for example, if the Confederates rolled a 7 and the Union rolled a 5, the Confederates would get 2 action points to spend. Now, After they spend their 2 action points, the Union will also get 2 action points. And you'll see I'll be using 2 counters on here. This one to indicate the original value of the die roll, and then a little flag marker, one of the control markers, to indicate where I actually am. I like that because if I, let's say I have 4 Confederate points and I spend 2 of them, well, now I don't remember that I rolled a 4-point difference. So I like to have 2 track markers there. Okay, so what you spend, you use this command point cost chart, and that'll indicate, hey, if I want to move just a strength point, that costs me 1. And it's got specifics of what I can do in each one. This seems very complex, but it really isn't terribly so. Everything has a cost in command points, but it also has a cost in actions. Those are usually the same, but for example, if I pick a leader, that costs me an action point off of this track, but no command points off my tracks down here. Some of these will be affected by Confederates losing their supplies. Reinforcements also don't cost command points, but they do cost off your reinforcement track. All right. If I won the die roll here, if I was the guy who got the more, I get a free reinforcement point, either off my reinforcement track or out of my leader pool. I get to pick 1 leader and put them somewhere they're allowed to be. All right. Allowed to be generally means one of my cities in my home area, but it can also mean within an army, and that's one of the big bonuses of an army. I could have Lee marching into Pennsylvania and still reinforce him if he's in supply with leaders, with troops. There are a lot of different things you can do, and we'll kind of try to skim through them in a little bit, but basically you have this whole menu of different choices, most of which you probably won't be doing on any, well, many of which you won't be doing on any given turn, but you'll probably get most of them through any turn, through a turn. The number after the turn ends, which can happen one of 2 ways. One, it can happen through these die rolls matching up against one of the numbers below here. The other is, if you got nothing left to do and your opponent's got nothing left to do, the turn is over. If you've cleared out all your leaders, all your reinforcements, and all your command points for both players, the game turn is over. It's ended sort of the natural way. I'd say maybe less than half the turns end that way. Usually they end up ending through here. Once the turn ends, however far this has gone, the Confederates are going to get victory points for that. So the more active the game is, and in the early turns, actually active turns are probably good for the Confederates, but later in the game you really want the turns to kind of flow quickly. You don't want the Union to be doing a lot, because you can't respond as much. Anyway, it's a nice little way of kind of providing a balance to the victory point total, however you want to see that. And that gets accumulated in the Confederates' favor. The rally phase, any units that are that are demoralized lose a strength point at this point. Now you can rally during your actions. Again, we'll go through what the different actions allow. If the unit or force is in supply, it gets rid of its demoralization marker, and that's these little tags here, double-sided. If the unit is out of supply, it gets to keep its demoralization marker, but it still loses a strength point. And we'll have to go over supply a little bit, but supply is fairly simple. For the most part, it's tracing to a rail line that can connect a couple of cities within your home territory. And you can extend that it's tracing, I think, 4 hexes. It may only be 2 for rail, for direct to rail. You can extend that with these depots, which allow you to go 4 hexes further. So here's a line of depots, 4 hexes, 1, 2, 3, 4, to a depot in Little Rock. 1, 2, 3, up to Fayetteville. Depots can only be in locations, which are towns and stockades as well. And then I trace up here. Oh, I'm sorry, that's Fayetteville. That's Clarksville. I trace up here, and then I can trace 4 more hexes to Price's army, which does not need a depot. He could actually make it all the way to Springfield there, and if he makes it and captures it from lines, he can build a depot there. All right, I'll connect this to the next video. All right, after the rally phase, you hit an end phase, which just really is moving the game turn marker forward and starting the process over. Okay, let's start going through the action, the rules kind of in a little bit more detail. Resource allocation, I've already kind of explained how you set that up, but on the first turn of the game, yeah, I'm not going to worry too much about that. A couple of victory point things that are noted here. So one thing is the Mississippi River control. If the Union's able to control pretty much all the locations along the Mississippi River, the Confederacy becomes split in 2. And remember this whole production imports thing? Well, there's extra counters for the Trans-Mississippi, and that has its own production, which will then be subtracted from the main production, and its own imports, which will be subtracted from the main imports. That is a real body blow to the Confederacy to cut them in half across the river, and it's one of the things that the Union should really make as a major goal, I think. Unfortunately, that requires using the naval rules, and I'm not very good with naval rules ever. I just don't think well in terms of naval and amphibious operations. So I've always been kind of bad at this game, especially with the Union. It doesn't usually... I've gotten to the point where I can handle them somewhat, but I think I'm better playing the Confederates because I can react and try to defend. Of course, they do have to kind of defend ahead of time in terms of fortifications and such. Things that look like, hey, these are great ideas. If the Confederates control Washington, they get 20 victory points per turn that they own it, or 10 if they don't have supplies or if they're demoralized. This can cause them to win the game. It also forces the Union to spend all their discretionary points over in the East. If instead they just cut off Washington from part of the rail net, they only get 2 victory points, and I don't think that causes an immediate Confederate victory, but it does generate some additional points and can be a problem. I've seen that happen. I've never seen Washington actually fall in this game. I've kind of explained this. Leader, okay. So when your leaders are involved in battles, they have the, if they fight the battle and they're not wounded, their next promotion counter, remember they have a limit to how far they can go. So Lyons, for example, normally starts at 1 star. If he wins a battle at 1 star, his 2-star counter will be available next turn. And if it's drawn from the leader pool next turn, he gets a promotion and he becomes... Usually, he's able to command more troops. That's the big thing. 1 star can only command 2 troops. 2 stars can command 6 strength points of troops. 3 stars can command 6 strength points of troops or an army. And 4 stars can command a group of armies, all in 1 hex. A group of armies usually isn't terribly valuable, although it could be in the West, and it could be because it's hard to shift forces around. Now, the leaders become better or worse as they did historically with increased commands. So someone like Sherman gets significantly better as he goes along, whereas some of the leaders like Hood become kind of questionable as they start losing limbs and things. You're allowed, when you have a 3 or 4 star, well, a 3-star general, you'd never do this with a 4-star. When you have a 3-star general in charge of an army, you're allowed to remove him. You can remove him by putting somebody who's higher ranked or higher precedence in his space. And that could happen accidentally. Gee, good old Fremen stumbling in command of your army is not a good thing to have happen. And this can cause some kind of weird play situations where a whole command center of U.S. Union 3-star generals ends up somewhere like Indianapolis with 1 strength point between them, and they're sort of like the Grand Command of the West that essentially doesn't affect anything. One of the things that I kind of wish the game had is a lot of things the leader system, because it was just such an exciting and neat thing, but it has some flaws in it. One of the things I wish it had, not really a flaw, is I wish it had the ability to grant theater commands. So for example, Halleck was kind of a mixed valued commander in the West. He really despised Grant, but he had some good effects in terms of how he handled the whole theater, and actually proved himself to be fairly effective. And likewise, you'd have Scott probably as theater command in the East to begin with, but eventually McClellan takes that position. And it would require a whole new layer to the game. There may be an option for it. I know there's a bunch of optional rules, a bunch of variants that have come up for this game. I'm not really familiar with any of them, unfortunately, and don't really want to take a look at them now. But anyway, another way to remove a leader is to just sack him. Now, you have a few choices for this. This is somewhat similar to the system I vaguely remember from For the People. I only played that once, so I can't do a great comparison. My For the People comparison, I have a pretty good grasp on this game, having played a lot of times. So For the People probably, that's the place you want to look to see how I compare the two. I said some things, though, there that, well, maybe aren't too believable. So a 4-star general, or a 3-star general can be removed by spending 2 command points, and that'll of course take some action points as well. And then you have some choices. You can permanently demote him to a 2-star general, which is kind of good with somebody like Hooker, who's decent good 2-star general, but a lousy, well, a not particularly good 3-star general. You could just remove him from the army and boot him somewhere if you think he's going to be useful somewhere at some later point. Maybe move him to another army, whatever. You don't usually see people do that. And then the final thing you can do is you can just sack him completely, and he goes into this remove leader space, and it's as though he's dead. He can't come back in the game in any sense of the word. If you lose your general in an army, someone has to be promoted to take command of that army. And I don't remember how exactly that happens. I think somebody has to, the highest ranked unassociated with an army general has to go move to join it, which can be kind of painful. Leaders come on the board, except at the beginning of the game, face down. And you can see they're just a star that way. So that the opponent doesn't know who your leaders are. I'll also be playing with an option that keeps the troop strengths on the board hidden. You don't know what's in any given stack unless you do cav reconnaissance. And even then, you don't know precisely. You know within a strength point. So they could be lying in either direction depending on what they want. Leaders have a number of effects. For one thing, you can define a force to move. Normally you can only move a single strength point without a leader, but a leader, for his activation level, initiative, whatever, that first number up here, he can move whatever he can command. And Polk, for example, could command 6 strength points because he's a 2-star leader. 1-star leaders are pretty iffy on their own. They can only command 2 strength points, and they very quickly get outclassed by larger forces. The combat table is not friendly to big odds differences. It's okay to small strength point differences. Ground movement is fairly normal. Hex to hex, there is a little bit of difference. You can kind of block the river lines by using a ship, and it actually is on the hex side. That's kind of a weird thing. I've seen a few games do that, and it exerts a zone of influence for 5 hex sides along there, and that'll prevent anybody from crossing that or tracing supply or anything like that. Leaders can move on their own. You can move by rail. While you're moving across rail lines, if they're opposing rail lines, you get control of them. But cavalry aren't as good at that. First of all, they can't capture cities on their own. I'll explain in a moment what makes something cavalry. Because this is a strength point game, and all you have are these strength points that look like infantry. But cav on their own can kind of rip up rail lines or take control of them, actually. But they have to spend a movement point for each hex that they have. Now, cav has a higher movement point rating. I don't know if I have that somewhere. The Union always gets 6 strength points that they can move. Looking for the movement point rating. I think it's 4 for infantry, 6 for cav. I don't really see it. Yeah, 4 for infantry, 6 for cav. So what makes something cavalry? Well, a cav leader is what makes something cavalry. And there aren't any at the beginning of the game, but there are some that show up right away, like Jeb Stuart. Whatever they can command is considered cavalry, if it's stacked with them. And that can be a plus or a minus. For the most part, though, you want cav, especially once you're playing with the scouting rules that allow for that. Alright, combat itself. Combat's kind of neat in this game. Once you determine which chart you're on, remember, you have 2 to 1, you're here. You have less than 2 to 1, but you have a differential. You follow the differential. Without armies involved in combat, I'm going to get to armies in a moment, but without armies involved in combat, you have one leader, your highest ranked leader. And whatever value he has in his rightmost number, that's going to be your plus to your die roll. With one exception. If it's in a box, a colored box like this, you're giving it to the opponent. So Polk's so bad that he gives a +1 to his opponent in a combat. Alright. And then you just roll the dice. You look on the chart. So say I was at a 2 to 1 and I rolled a 4 and I was the attacker. I cross-reference by the size of my force, and that's the damage that I do to my opponent. I do a 1. This would be a demoralized 1. Demoralization gives you combat column shifts. You can't attack if you're demoralized. So, in general, what happens is armies go into a fight, both sides get demoralized usually, and then it becomes kind of this race who can undemoralize and hit the demoralized guy. Whether or not that can happen, that can be a major effect there. And you apply the results simultaneously. Now, armies change the whole world. For armies, you have to have a 3-star leader, and every 3-star leader has a little number in the center, which he will be using as the army commander instead of his tactical rating to the right. Now, that center number is rerolls allowed. And again, if it's inside a colored box, like good old McClellan here, you're giving rerolls to your opponent. And what rerolls mean? Well, quite simply, you each roll a die, You add your modifiers. We'll get to that in a second because armies are different there too. You add your modifiers, and then if you don't like the die roll results, you can spend a reroll to force yourself or your opponent to reroll a die. And you can keep doing that until both people are out of rerolls, essentially. The other thing about armies, though, is that the army commander doesn't add to the tactical value of the force, but all the other leaders do. And that can go for a modifier of up to +6 on the die roll for either or both sides. Now, what that means is the Union starts seeing a powerful Confederate army. There are lots of really good Confederate leaders. You know, you've got these guys with 1s, 2s all over the place. They tend to conglomerate in an army like the Army of Northern Virginia, and it becomes very good and gets a +6 on the die roll. Well, then it doesn't matter too much if you have some kind of crappy guys like Polk there, or Butler if he's not in charge of the actual army, because you don't want to give rerolls to your opponent. Giving some extra pluses, because +6 is the maximum you can get. So having some real buttheads in your army doesn't work necessarily to your disadvantage that much. Do you want them there? Well, there are some that get better, but for the most part, it's just a matter of you don't want to expend the effort of getting them out of your army. So you can draw new leaders and add them to your army, and you end up giving your opponent bonuses if that army engages, but it's not that big a deal. Now the problem is in each battle, each time you roll the dice on battle, each time you complete a battle, you have to do these leader loss checks, and you roll the dice, and the lower ranked a leader is, the more likely he's going to get killed or wounded. This is particularly dangerous for Sherman, who starts off with only 1 star, and Grant comes in at 2 stars. Somebody like Lee is always going to be on the 3-star table, which means he only gets injured on a 2. I'm going to be playing with an option that allows either or both Lyons and Jackson, who's over on the track right now, to advance to 3-star leaders, and assumes that they will be very good. They will be as good as Grant as 3-star leaders. I like that option because it's too possible you'll lose a good leader, especially if you lose Sherman early in the game and you don't have Lyon as a possible backup. The Union could be in a lot of trouble because they really want leaders with 2 initiative and good combat values. Speaking of which, the Confederates have one of the most interesting leaders in the game, good old Earl Van Dorn. He's got a 2 initiative, but he's bad at combat and even worse at leading armies. He's the guy who essentially lost the Trans-Mississippi, so I think he deserves his rating quite well. All right. There's a possibility of overrun if you get far enough on the chart, and that actually you kind of have to look here. I believe it's at 8-1 that happens. The attacker at 8. Yeah, actually that's overrun 1, which is a step higher. That means that it takes at least 1 column shift to get you down to overrun, and a 2nd column shift to get you off of that situation. And those are automatic victories. I don't even think you have to do a casualty check for the attacker. Leader loss check. You have retreat rules, which basically, if one guy's demoralized and the other guy's not, the demoralized guy has to retreat. If both are in the same status, the guy who took the most hits has to retreat. The naval rules. Alright. These are tough for me. I don't use them very often. And usually I just kind of fudge them in my head because the Confederates don't have a lot of options for Navy. So I'm going to kind of gloss over them here. I may touch on them deeper as I'm using them. But the Union, yeah, I'm glossing over everything. But the Union has 3 naval leaders. And they can command a stack, they have 2 stars, they can command a stack of 6 ships and any troops that can carry. You can also use Union land leaders to command naval units. they can command a stack of 6 things, which include ships. You have the ability to move either with ocean-going ships along the ocean itself, or with both types along navigable rivers. Navigable rivers are going to be these darker colored rivers. And sometimes it's kind of tough to see that for me. The Union has a certain number of strength points. They can move by sea. They don't always have to use sea transport points. They're going to have these ocean transport points. There's conditions under which when they're moving from friendly port to friendly port, I don't think they even need them. But they do need them if they're going to do amphibious invasions. Amphibious invasions give you... I thought they give a column shift. One thing they give is they give the defender a bonus strength point. So even if you invaded, say, Savannah, while it's empty, the Confederates would have a notional strength point there, which helps. They also get points for the terrain in the hex, and then that's fought out. And if the Union fails to make an invasion, they have to kind of sail back to where they came from. Forts and fortresses have this bombarding effect where you can attack them, in which case you get to do naval combat against the fort, or you can try to run their guns, in which case they get to shoot you, and only that. And there's also rules where the ironclads and everything can get involved, and they fire on that naval combat table. The naval rules strongly favor the Union. Confederate ironclads, famous as they might be, they take one hit and they're pretty much out. The Union's allowed to repair their naval units. They come back in the next turn unless they're actually destroyed. Supplies have already mainly talked about supplies. The Union's able to supply itself by sea as well, and also, of course, down the river. Okay, armies have some special rules beyond just attacking, beyond the combat value of them with the rerolls and such not. They also have the ability, and this is what their strongest part is, of intercepting. Okay, so if you move next to an enemy army, and those are marked with these markers, and then the strength points will be tracked using a strength point marker over on the army tracks over there. If you move next to one, you roll a die. The enemy army can roll a die. Well, if you declare you're moving next to one, the enemy army can roll a die. If he rolls higher than his initiative rating, he's allowed to move 1 hex. He can run away, or he can intercept you, and he moves into the hex before you move in, and you must move into it, and then you must attack him. And that can be very painful because he can move into a hex where there's going to be a defensive benefit. Alright, forts, fortresses, stockades. You can build the forts and fortresses. The stockades are already on the map, and they're just really places where you can put depots, I think. They may have a defensive benefit as well. Doesn't look like it. Alright. States. States are an interesting situation. You start the game with a bunch of states neutral. Missouri, Kentucky, and not Maryland, but West Virginia. Control of those is the major focus often of the early part of the game. Missouri and West Virginia is almost completely Union. I think all the rail lines are already Union. Missouri, it's also very close to being Union, but you've got Lyons and Price here ready to play Wilson's Creek. And yeah, go watch that video if you... and then Kentucky, which is under restrictions on the first 2 turns, actually, I think. Turn 3 is when you're allowed to get it. to move into it, and all the rail lines turn Union on turn 3, which means the Union can actually just do rail movement through all of Kentucky and grab most of the cities really easily. They still have to take Boudica and this Mill Springs. Not quite cities are these things, which are just victory point hexes. They don't count for state conversion, but they count for the victory point totals. Each state in the game, although several states, the border states, Virginia, Maryland, has militia. Those states that I just listed, their militia's already been called up, so they can't call it up. Basically, if the enemy violates the state's integrity in any way, moving into it, whatever, including a naval invasion, you're allowed to slap a strength point down immediately. It's kind of hard to remember which states have and haven't had their militia drawn. I don't usually do anything about it, just hope for the best and hope that I can remember it. Alright, we got more coming, so not a lot more. Alright, victory. So, the game will go the whole length, all 19 turns, unless the Confederates manage an automatic victory. One of their automatic victory criteria is if they capture Washington, they get 20 points or 10 points, and there's an immediate victory check. If the Confederates have more victory points than the Union does at that point, the game is over, it's a Confederate victory. The other changes happen, well, if you're playing a particular scenario, at the end of that scenario, you'd play to that end of that scenario. And there's different starting points as well, so you can start the war at different points into the game, or you can end it early, or you can do both. Turn 17, though, the Union has to have 50 points more victory points than the Confederates do at that point. And that's counting everything, CP table total, all kind of stuff like that. If they don't make it, Lincoln doesn't get elected. McClellan wins the election, or someone, and is willing to settle for peace. The war has gone on long enough, it's painful enough. But that usually doesn't happen. It's often a hard push to make the Union get over that hump. If they're doing poorly, they may have trouble, and historically they did. There was some worry at one point that Lincoln wouldn't get the election, but then he won overwhelmingly. The game only goes 2 more turns, and the victory point differential there is the Union has to be at 75 points. In those 2 turns, assuming they were at near 50, they have to make 25 more points. Now, that 50-point goal is kind of yeah, I'm on target. You know, I'm meeting all these, actually. Maybe not tremendously well. This game turn 13 one's tough. I find that one hard to make. But making the 17 election one is usually either fairly easy or it's a tough slog or whatever, but I feel like that's what I'm targeting, and then I got 2 more turns to make all those other points up, and that's always, at least psychologically, difficult for me because I usually am not planning well enough in the future. You got all your setups here, working their way around. Alright, let us not go to the far west yet. We'll touch on that. But here's a list of the different things you can do with command points. Moving strength points cost 1 each. Moving a leader costs 1. Moving a leader with troops costs the leader's initiative. Picking doesn't cost any, but it costs an action point. Removing a leader, that's political removal. Building an army. When you want to build an army, you have to be in supply, and you have to have a leader present, a 3-star leader, and you spend 2 command points, and now you've got an army there. You can move more than 6 strength points at once at that point. Well, unless it's one of the little wimpy armies that aren't really armies at all, but they allow you to use more leaders. They allow you to intercept. They allow you to bring reinforcements into them, so they still have a lot of advantages. But when you start getting to the bigger armies, you've got some really, really powerful forces that you can bring to the bear into the game. Depots. Usually I don't see a lot of depot building going on in the game, but there are places, the Trans-Mississippi especially, where they're really necessary if you want to make gains there. That makes making the war continue there effectively to be very, very difficult. So what usually ends up happening is what historically happened. You maybe make some ground up here with the Union, and you maybe make some ground coming in out of New Orleans, but it's really tough to convert Arkansas and Louisiana, and it's just something that you're probably not going to want to do. It's not worth expending your discretionary points to win the Trans-Mississippi when you might need them somewhere else. Of course, I'll probably end up chasing them and spending them over in the far west or something. Yeah. Building forts costs 3 points, and you're allowed to build them in a victory point city. Now, they give you a defensive bonus here of 1 column shift. A fortress is going to give you 2. To build a fortress, you have to have a fort in place, and you spend 3 more. And it gives you this greater defense. But one of the big problems here is the Confederates are only allowed 5 fortresses in the course of the game. So they got to be really kind of careful. Quite often they want these to be on important river locations, like say Memphis or Vicksburg, where they can prevent the Union from getting control of the Mississippi. There's a problem with this, which is usually they can get 1 good solid defensive point along the Mississippi. They usually can't get more than 1. And they really need more than 1 to control their river lines. Otherwise, the Union boats can position themselves north and south of that fortress, not quite on it, and prevent the Confederates from creating a supply link going across. Of course, let's say they own Vicksburg, they can probably control this hex and they can run supplies as far as Monroe. So then it does become kind of important to actually take that. But the fortress will control the hex sites it's adjacent to. As will a fort for that matter. Entering naval strength points, the Confederates, each naval ironclad that they bring in costs them 2 action points and 2 command points, and they must use discretionary points for them. The Union can spend 2 of their special naval points, which are just bonus for them, and they get their entire naval pool into play at once. Or they can use discretionary for this. Recovering from demoralization, you spend the leader's command rating, their initiative rating, and you can undemoralize their force if they're in supply. This avoids you losing a strength point at the end of the turn, but it eats up your commands. Of course, you really want to do that because you don't want to be in battle when you're demoralized. In fact, there's, I forgot what it is. If you're demoralized and you take another demoralize, I think you automatically get the retreat. All right, let's go to the Far West briefly. So the Far West also operates on command points, which you have to use your action points for. And this is where one of the funny things is, because you sit there and you say, well, I don't know what to do, but I can find something I can do in the Far West. And you expend your Far West command points that way, because you can't use them anywhere else, and you don't really know what you want to do elsewhere. And then the turn ends, and you didn't do anything where you should be. At least if you're me. The Far West has these tribal units. Their main purpose in life is to do Indian raids against towns, and they roll based on the type they are. This is not including civilized Indians. They would not do this. You roll on the type that they are, and you see what happens. And they might return, they might switch sides. Okay? There's a side for both players on those. And they might actually successfully massacre the town. If they're eliminated, I think they come back 2 turns later. You can fight them. They can't attack on their own. And if a strength point attacks them, it kills them. If a Texas Ranger or civilized Indian attacks a tribal Indian, both players roll a die, and whoever gets the highest wins, and the loser is eliminated, and put just 1 turn in advance for being destroyed. Now, stand weighty is allowed to bring civilized Indians into battle. But if he does so, there's a chance that the Indians don't fight. 1 die for each counter. On a 1 through 5, the Indians eliminated before the combat's resolved. Your Texas Rangers can be used to hunt the Indians. We already kind of talked about that. Territory-wise, the only thing really up for grabs here is New Mexico. I think it's worth 2 victory points if you take it. But also controlling the Indian Territory, which is smaller. Texas, it's mainly there to be burnt. And likewise, you might see Confederate Indians attacking in Kansas or even Missouri to try to burn some of the cities down. If they burn down a victory point location, well, that's mainly useful against the Confederates. If you burn down a Confederate victory point location, you're taking away their production capability, which can be kind of neat. Optional rules, there's a series of optional rules. I'm playing with Jackson and the Lion are not killed. Army size placement, that says, hey, ignore the historical restrictions on the armies. It's kind of an interesting thing. Oh, there's one historical iffy thing here. You're not allowed to move an army by sea. Now, the Army of the Potomac was moved by sea. So, actually, you cannot do the Peninsular Campaign in this game. You just can't. You can kind of fake it, send off a corps of 6 units to handle it and conduct it, but you can't actually do what was historically done. One of the little gripes here. The solitaire play, this gives you random allocation over here on this resource allocation chart for the Confederates, and then you're playing the Union, trying to outguess them, but you still have to play the whole game with different hats. I would rather just roll some dice to help me make my decisions under an informed choice. Cav intelligence gathering, again, forces are face down or unknown unless you advance with Cav. If you're next to somebody with Cav, you can force the enemy to reveal the size of his force. How big a deal is that? It really isn't that big a deal. Usually you have a pretty good idea of what your enemy's got on the field in your general area. Usually you've engaged him before. Random leader entry. Okay, I've tried this one. This can really screw the whole game up. You shuffle all the leaders up and put them face down randomly. So you might get Lee on turn 1, or you might not get him until turn 12. I feel like that one is just too damaging to how the game plays out. It's sometimes an interesting idea. Some of the other random leader variants might be more interesting. There's one where you actually have to generate the leaders, and I'd have to look to see how it handles promotions, etc. It could be very interesting, because one of my ideas in the game was that, you know, if you lose a battle with some general, he maybe shouldn't get that promotion. Well, if he gets destroyed, he won't. Alright, that's about it. I've said before, I think this is a long-time favorite of mine, but I've put a lot of playings into it, so I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it. I know last time I played it, it felt a little, it felt cool to not be doing the Far West, but still, this is a game I've played a good deal of times, even if I haven't ever gotten good at it. And by a good deal for me, I'm talking actually probably close to 20, which is pretty severe for me to play a game. Only a couple of times opposed, though. Alrighty, up it goes.